Thanks for taking the time today to learn. I appreciate folks who are dedicated to continuous learning. That's kind of what we're all about here at Next After, is understanding what makes people give, what motivates people to say yes to our offers. Today we're going to focus on email appeals. You may be wondering, and maybe not as much since you're attending this webinar, but why are we talking about email? I've been to so many conferences where we talk about the death of some channel of communication, the death of direct mail, the death of email, and maybe people might say, you know, we shouldn't be talking about email, we should be talking about Snapchat, because Snapchat's cool, millennials like Snapchat, and we want Snapchat. Or maybe we should be talking about crowdfunding, because that's hot, people like the idea of that. Maybe we should be talking about omni-channel fundraising, whatever that is. There's all these kind of hype words. You know, email was invented in 1962. It was actually first called email in 1992. So it's not exactly a novel concept, but when we look at the metrics behind email, it's a highly effective medium of communication. Let me show you some anonymized data from 3 clients of ours. This shows the impact of email. So here you can see on this chart, we've got revenue represented by the orange bars and traffic represented by the blue line. So this is an organization over 1 year. This represents $1.6 million of fundraising. Number one driver of traffic, number one source of revenue is email. You can see over there on the right, even though they get a lot of traffic from organic search, it doesn't result in revenue, because email is the primary way this organization stays in front of their donors. Here's another organization over a smaller period of time, slightly smaller organization. They get tons of website traffic, but it doesn't really convert into revenue. Email actually gets a lot less traffic than the website, but has much higher revenue. Here's yet another client. You know, they get a ton of organic search traffic and a good amount of revenue from that. And email hardly gets, you know, proportionally much traffic at all, but it's the primary driver of revenue. So email, you know, if you look at what's actually driving the people to give to us, so email is one of the, not just on these 3 clients, but across most of the clients and most of the client data that we look at, email is the number one driver of digital fundraising revenue. So, you know, you'll notice in the title of this, we talked about 6 proven strategies. I want to make something very clear. Today, we're not going to talk about this phrase, rather, best practices. And there's a reason why. If you're here for best practices, I hope you'll stay with us, because this doesn't mean that we don't have what you're here for, but there's a very specific reason we don't talk about best practices. We did this research study a little while ago, a couple years ago, called 5 Ways to Cut Through the Clutter. We had done a previous study where we gave gifts to 150 different organizations, and we signed up for even more organizations' communications, and we have this thing we call the aggregate donor inbox. It is literally tens of thousands of emails that we've received since then. These are actually the ones we received today, so you can see the ones we received since 5 this morning. We've analyzed a lot of email, and we realized that best practices are what people like to talk about, and they say, you should do this, you should do this. But the problem is when everyone does the same best practices, these sort of things happen. So from all this email, we analyzed all of these emails, tens of thousands of emails, and we realized that everyone tends to send emails at the same time. And if you look over here on this side of the clock, you'll see the majority of emails came in between 12 and 3 p.m. If you're like us and you've kind of been around the email fundraising marketing world for a while, you probably remember that for a long time the conventional wisdom was, hey, you got to send your emails, you know, on Tuesday and Thursday between 12 and 2 p.m. The problem is when everybody does that, you know, when best practices are adopted universally, they quickly become ineffective, because it actually becomes the worst time to send. You know, that's when email inboxes are most clogged. So we're not going to talk about best practices. We're going to talk about proven strategies. And I want to address and answer this question real quick. What does it mean for a strategy to be proven? It means that we've allowed data to tell us what the correct strategy to go forward with is. And not just data, we've allowed our donors to tell us the correct strategy. We have a fundamental belief here that we are not fundraising experts. I'm not a fundraising expert, and I don't believe they actually exist. But I'll tell you who the fundraising experts are our donors, because they're the ones who are actually giving donations. So if we listen to them and look at the data of how they interact with us, we can actually learn from the fundraising experts. So you might see you know, an email here with a pre-header. You see the preview text down there on the bottom. It's a little different. We move the personalization to the front in a second. in the treatment there, and we got an 8% increase in click-through rate in that email. So this is just an example of how we prove a strategy with data. I'll mention this. I'll go through the entire Fundraisers Creed at the end of this broadcast. But Article 3 of the Fundraisers Creed, which is a set of beliefs that we operate off of. We've got a lot of people who love this thing. They've printed them out and put them up in their office. I'd love for you to grab one at the end. Article 3 says this. It says, we believe that testing trumps speculation and that clarity trumps persuasion. We fundraisers, we've got to base our decisions on honest data, and donors need to base their decisions on honest claims. So we need to be honest in how we interpret the data and get over our feelings and go with what our donors tell us they prefer, and then we also need to be honest in the way that we address our donors. We've collected tons of these proven strategies. You know, they've proven to work for some organizations. They may not work for you, but it's worth testing. We've collected them and open sourced them in our Next After research library. It's more than 450 fundraising experiments with the results. You can see all the data. You can see the treatments. So if you're writing your next appeal and you want to test something, you want an idea, this is a place to go. It's nextafter.com/research. Feel free to go there because, like we said, the strategies have been proven for other organizations, but that doesn't mean that you should just take them at face value. You've got to test these with your organization as well. So hopefully that's clear. We're not going to be talking about best practices. We're going to be talking about proven strategies and giving you ideas for what to test next. I want to quickly review all the different elements of a fundraising email appeal, because as we start to pick apart email appeals, we realize that there are very many elements of these appeals that we could be testing, and there's insight to be gleaned from each of them. Element number one, the Cinder. We're doing a lot of research lately on Cinders, and we're realizing that Cinders have a huge impact. Who it comes from, your email comes from, has a huge impact on the trust that is built with a donor. Sometimes that trust is measured through email performance metrics like open rate, click-through rate, donor response rate, but ultimately we're building trust with our communications. So if Big Brothers Big Sisters emails me as an organization, I either think that I love Big Brothers Big Sisters, by the way. I volunteered there in college. But if they email me as an organization, you know, it makes me think that maybe this is coming from a marketing machine. Kind of starts to tip their hand there. Element number two, the reply email. Here they've said, no thanks, don't even think about it. This is coming from not a person, it's coming from a machine. So make sure to not reply to this, please. In fact, we're ordering you, don't reply. Send time. When you send your emails, there's a lot of you know, folks who would tell you there's a perfect time to send your emails, but your donors will tell you when they open emails. And you know, we want to make sure that we're in front of them at the right time. Subject line, obviously an important part. It's one of the first two elements or three elements your donor sees, depending on where they're opening your email. And we're going to show you some interesting research we've done on subject lines. Preview text. This is something that's a lot of email providers allow you to dictate. If you don't put anything in there, it often just grabs the first part of your email, which could be a good or bad thing. But that kind of gives a recipient a hint as to what your email is going to be about. Design. This is a quick way to start some interesting, lively conversations, is talk about the designs of your emails. Because design is, you know, creativity is often subjective, but there are hard and fast ramifications for design, as we'll explore a little later today. Copy length. You know, do we want to write these emails that look like direct mail letters? Well, maybe. I mean, it depends on how long it takes to get the value proposition across. Or do we want to write these, you know, short and sweet ones? Well, we'll look at some data to tell you how long your copy should be, or you know, how we should find out how long our copy should be. A tone. How do we write to our emails? How do we speak? Sometimes it's not how long it takes you to say it or how it looks, but it's what you're actually saying. So is it when you stand with heritage, lawmakers know exactly what you believe. It means you stand up for your principles. Or is it the bottom here? I wanted to check in to see if you'll be able to contribute towards Heritage's $1 million goal by the December 31st deadline. How are we talking to our donors, and how does that affect their trust of our organization and our senders? Images. You know, are images a great thing in email? Are they a bad thing in email? Should your entire email be an image? Well, maybe. There's only one way to find out, and that's to test. But images, as you'll see, a lot of the emails that we've received in this donor inbox and a lot of the ones that you sent to us this morning have images in them. So finally, calls to action. What are we asking people to do in our emails? You know, the point of an email differs a lot of times when it's a fundraising email versus some sort of advocacy email or even a personal email you might send someone. Usually when you email someone, you expect one thing to happen, and that's for them to reply. Now, we're asking for our donors to do different things sometimes, and we want them to take an action. So there's all sorts of different ways we ask people to, or all sorts of different ways we call people to action. These are actually pulled from the emails that I received today that I asked for. So on that note, I sent out an email this morning, said, hey, I need your help. I need you to send me your email appeals. The reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted to gather some quick benchmarks that would be relevant to you. Don't worry, I'm not going to show anyone's appeal that you sent me. It's all held in confidence, but we did some quick survey work on those. And that data is going to drive the strategies that we are going to talk through today that you should be testing. So the first piece of data I want to show you is this. 91% of the emails we received this morning, the appeals, were sent from either the founder, the president, or the main figurehead of the organization. Now, that's pretty typical. We have a lot of clients who do that. You know, that's kind of a foregone conclusion in a lot of areas, a lot of organizations. But the question is this: do people actually believe that the founder of your organization sat down and wrote them an email? Maybe it gives some sort of anchoring mentally. Maybe they know the founder. It's the most visible person. But do they believe it? How does that affect how they respond to our emails? So I want to show you strategy number one. Maybe we should be testing different senders. Let me show you a couple experiments here with some real data on how a couple of organizations have tested different senders. So this is an email from Caring Bridge. A lot of you are familiar with Caring Bridge. This is part of an automated email series they were sending out, and had an appeal that asked for a gift in the series. The first email came from, you can see the signatures there, Sana Mering, who's the founder of Caring Bridge. She has sent almost all the email appeals thus far. I think, in fact, she had sent all the email appeals. And we decided, hey, would people believe it more if we're asking for a gift? How would that affect open rate if we just sent it from Kelly, a member of the development team at Caring Bridge? So you can see we had this kind of heavily designed email. There were a lot of things happening after the open, but before the open, the only thing that we were testing was the sender. So Sana versus Kelly. And if you want a great way to challenge your CEO, this might be interesting for you. You can see the control of the treatment there, and Kelly's email produced a 6.3% increase in open rate. So that's interesting because sometimes we think that we have to send emails from the president or the founder or the figurehead of our organization because of authority. But the real interesting thing that this test suggests is that maybe people actually believe it more if it's from somebody within the organization. And two, maybe there's a novelty effect in changing up the sender. Maybe it's can actually develop relationships between our donors with the new members of our organizations. So this email, by the way, there's a lot we'll talk about later in the design of this email, but email also had a much higher click-through rate and response rate as well. So there's something that says about trust. You'll see when you go to the research library, and on every experiment we reviewed today, this slide, which will show you the actual numbers behind this, so you can see this is truly rooted in data, but it tells us that a different sender and subject line was actually able to successfully increase open rate, and maybe that'll work for you. So strategy one, testing a different sender. Here's another one. This is actually an email from us at Next After. A couple months ago, we did a broadcast called Turning Facebook Likes into Donors, and a technology company let us send an email to their list. And we had a hypothesis. This was the email. It's from Tim Kachuriak, my colleague. It was sent to a borrowed email list, and so we believed that there was low perceived familiarity. These people might not know who Tim Kachuriak is. And so what we did was we said, hey, maybe if we add the brand name, they may not have heard of Tim. Maybe they've heard of Next After. We're not so cocky that we believe a lot of people have heard of our company's name, but at least maybe 5% more people have heard of the company rather than the person's name. So we added this. We thought it might give some anchoring because the email sender was possibly unknown. You can see the control of the treatment right there. The only thing we added was that word, and we saw a 10% decrease in open rate. We thought that was funny. The other thing that we found was there's actually a 20% decrease in click-through rate. So like I said, we're not expert fundraisers, we're not expert email marketers, we're learning all the time as well. But what this tells us is that sometimes we might be we're on the quest to achieve more familiarity, but introducing a brand name in our subject line, or sorry, our sender name, which I did see come through in several emails that I was sent today, introducing that brand name might actually decrease familiarity. It might actually tell the recipient, hey, I don't know who you are. And it reminds them they don't know us, so it kind of puts a little bit of anxiety as they open our email and makes them less likely to open, click, or respond. So that also tells us another thing, is that these metrics are interconnected. The sender affects click-through rate. It just doesn't affect open rate. And let's talk about subject lines next. So this is a graph from a very, very well-known source on subject lines. A lot of people here know the best performing subject line in Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign was "Hey." And so all of a sudden you started to see all these people roll out subject lines with the word "Hey." The problem is subject lines don't live in vacuums. Like we just saw, these metrics and all these little elements of an email, they're all connected. So we need to make sure that they actually agree with each other and that they create a logical order of events for the recipient. So 51% of the email appeals that we received this morning had what we called subject line and call to action agreement. That's what I want to talk about with this next strategy, is measure every metric, even when you're just testing subject lines. Because sometimes you may be testing a subject line and looking at open rate, and it may be having an effect on other downstream metrics as well that you wouldn't know. So let me show you how this matters. I got an email from an organization, and this is the subject line. It said, "Supporter match status active." It kind of sounded like a kind of a robot had written that subject line. I'm not really sure what that means. Supporter match status active. Here's the copy. It said, "Dear friend, time is running out. There are only 5 days before our match challenge begins. Can we count on you to double your impact to help families in their fight against hunger and poverty around the world? We're getting close to our $1.5 million goal, but we won't get there before the July 31st deadline without your help." The call to action was renew your membership. And so what you can see here, this is how, looking critically at this, you can see there's not a whole lot of agreement between the subject line, the copy, and the call to action. The subject line, maybe they tested this and found that this got a big jump in open rate, but my question would be, is this actually leading me down through the mental conversation that you want me to have? Because honestly, as soon as I read the copy, I thought surely there's something off between the subject line and the copy, and I deleted the email. So let me show you a couple of experiments of how this actually works, and how subject line and call to action are actually extremely closely related. So subject line clarity affecting email click-through rate. This is a church in Vancouver called First United that does a lot of work with the homeless. The Cinder line at this point in their email journey was an organization. Emails came from First United, not a person. The subject line was informative. It said, "Spring cleaning is in full swing at First United." It didn't really give me a really a great incentive to open or click. Spring cleaning is in full swing. Well, great. That's awesome. They tested the second subject line here and saying, "Hey, can we actually get more people to take the action we want if we put join us in the subject line?" Because that, when you look at it, kind of makes you ask yourself some questions like, how can I join? What does join us mean? Join what? So you can see the control and the treatment there. This is a subject line test. It had no significant increase in open rate, but it had a 42.2% increase in click-through rate. Just the subject line. Everything else about the emails was exactly the same. So by asking people in the subject line to join, we actually got more people to take action. It means subject lines don't live in a vacuum. If you're looking at open rate, you may be measuring the right metric, because subject line is designed to increase open rate. Your subject line should incentivize people to open your emails. But we also have to be measuring every metric along this journey, because we may actually be disincentivizing people from clicking through of our emails and taking the the actions that we want them to take. With that said, I want to show you another metric from our emails today. Do your donors, and ask this question, do your donors know you are talking to them? 87% of the email appeals we received this morning had no first name personalization. That's a really interesting stat. One strategy, number 3 that we're going to look at today, is testing personalization of your emails, because if you remember, your donors are receiving this in context of the rest of their inbox. They don't just receive your email, they receive emails from a lot of other people. I can tell you right now, my personal email inbox is flooded with fantasy football emails from guys I'm playing with. I know those are real people, so that when an organization sends me something that doesn't know who I am, it actually stands out in that context. Let me show you how subject line personalization can affect your open rate. So this is another email from CaringBridge. Sana Marion here, moms equal the heart of CaringBridge. This is part of their Mother's Day appeal. It had this little emoji in there. The Cinder, Sana was relatively well known. We mixed it up with a different Cinder, who's actually a person who had been affected by CaringBridge, a woman named Camille Shiel. And the subject line said, "You amaze me, Jeff." So CaringBridge has my name, and they used it here. And you can see not only did they use it in the subject line, they actually used it in the preview text there as well, which is the rest of the email. It says, "Jeff, I'm Camille, and you, Jeff, you're seriously amazing. You're part of CaringBridge, ... So as I see this email pop into my inbox, a couple of things cross my mind. Number one, I don't know Camille Shiel. I've never met her. But she knows me, and so that may tell me something about my willingness to open this email. And it also honestly may bridge the gap and overcome a bit of the lack of name recognition that I have for her. So you can see the control and the treatment right there. It's had a 137.2% increase in open rate. That is very it's very abnormal, really, when you're sending an email from someone that the organization has never heard of before. But that's quite an impressive increase. We tend to think our senders must be consistent, but people may be more likely to open and engage with our emails if they believe that we know them. Let me show you a real quick email about subject line tone affecting open rate. So you can see this is our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips. He's written this subject line here, bringing the greatest message in a generation, ... And you can see the preview text there. It says web version cropped donate button, which were there was some code that was in there that was grabbing. It says, "I know you're busy, so I'll keep this short." So we did a kind of a different take on this. We were testing this with this organization, and they said, "Hey, instead of bringing the greatest message in a generation, let's try an invitation." Now that maybe sound like something that someone is more likely to send. And then you can see we included personalization on this email. So, "Dear Jeff, the first thing I see is this is to me. This person knows who I am." So the question is, would other people respond the same way? See the control and the treatment right there. There's a 44.7% increase in open rate. So all of these elements of the email are connected. And it's hard to connect them all. It's hard to connect sender and send time and subject line and design and copy and call to action. But as we start to group them into kind of the first elements that we see of the email, we start to see that there's a tremendous impact that we can have on the open and click through and response rates based on the first impression that someone gives. We give someone from our email. They call this concept the lizard brain. If some of y'all have heard that who study behavioral psychology, sometimes people's first impression of a communication can be the most powerful and the most impactful impression they have on the for the rest of the interaction and the communication. Now, personalization that implies and requires more of us. Some of our email acquisition forms don't have things like first name and last name. We're not asking for it. In fact, a lot of organizations do this. I kind of went on a quick search. I didn't look at every email we received, but I went to several of the websites and noticed that a lot of folks on this call are not asking for a first name. So we may need to back up, go further up the funnel, and change the way that we acquire the names of the people that we want to communicate with, the people who raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in your organization, because we may want to talk to them very personally later on. I want to talk about copy length, strategy number 4, testing copy length and its effect on conversion. People ask us this question all the time. They say, how long should my emails be? And I hate to disappoint, but there's not necessarily a right answer for that. The answer is this: your email should be long enough to adequately convey the value proposition and motivate your donor to click and take the intended action. But the question is, like, how much copy is it going to take to get that? Well, there's one way you can find out, and that's by showing it to our donors. Let me show you just a fascinating test where we thought we were right and we ended up being very, very wrong. This is a test, how long-form email copy affects click-through rate and donor conversion rate. This is with the Chuck Colson Center for Christian Worldview. This was done many years ago. It's a long-form email. You see, we had this email over there to the left. It's extremely long. You know, if you put that in a Word document, it'd be 3 or 4 pages long. It made a very compelling value proposition, and then there on the right you can see the donation page didn't have a lot of copy. It had some copy, but it didn't have a lot because the value proposition was made, and the ask was made in the email. So we said, hey, maybe we should, maybe that's asking too much. You know, we're getting highly motivated donors, but maybe we can get more people to the page, actually to click through the email to the landing page where they can actually make the gift if we make the email really short. So we took the same copy and kind of flipped the positioning. We made this really short email with a really long landing page. We made the ask on the landing page and you know, push people through from the email. You can see the control and the treatment there. It's the same copy, it's just arranged differently. We saw a 1,200% increase in click-through rate. These 4-digit percentage increases are things that get us jumping up and down in our office. We say, yes, we've cracked the code, we've gotten more people to engage. If click-through rate was the only email that we were, or the only email metric that we were measuring, we'd be extremely excited. We went from a very low click-through rate to a very high click-through rate. The problem is with these two email and landing page styles, we saw a 30% decrease in donations, which tells us, you know, it reminds us that sometimes where we make the ask and where we convey the value proposition has a lot to do with the motivation of the donor. So with the long-form email to the left, we drove what we would call motivated clicks. They were ready to give because we asked. On the right, you know, we see that we drove a lot more clicks, 1,209% more clicks, but they were not as motivated. So when they got to the landing page didn't do its job. Now you may ask, hey, couldn't you do some landing page testing here and improve the conversion? Yes, possibly we could. But you know, when we're talking about just raw revenue and donations, we're probably going to roll out the email that drives the most donations, and you know, right away, unless we have a lot of time to test this. So, you know, shorter copy in the email, we increase click-through, but we decrease donations. So there's a relationship between those two. The right copy length is something we have to test and find, and it might be different for every organization. It might be different for different appeals too. So keep pushing and testing on that. Images in the emails. You notice the previous email didn't have any images in it. 96% of the email appeals we received this morning had some sort of image in the email. Images can be very, very powerful. They can bolster the value proposition. But strategy number 5 that we're going to talk about today, I'm trying to ask an important question here. Like, do they really help us? Do images really help us? A lot of the images that we saw in the appeals we received this morning, you know, they pushed the copy down. There's just kind of a default image at the top of the page, and it may be that your email template has an image section in there, and you want to go through and fill out all the sections of your template, and so you drop an email image in there. But the question is it actually helping? Because it may actually tip your hand that this is a marketing email to your donors. So let's look at some images that we're using in email to be effective, and then see how effective they are actually being for us. So this is an experiment with Dallas Theological Seminary, how urgency affects conversion and average gift. We were sending these emails, DTS was, as part of their calendar year-end campaign. The email had a direct call to action. It was all text, and it said, make your year-end gift now. Everyone knows the calendar you're in. A lot of you raise a huge percentage of your revenue during that time, and there's this nice natural deadline. We talk about it in the email here that time's running out at the end of the year, but the question is, could we actually use an image to show that? So we took a countdown clock and we put an animated GIF in the email that was counting down to December 31st. We said, hey, this is email. We want to put this image in the email. We hypothesize that it will do better, but we're not just going to put it in there wholesale. We're actually going to test it and see, does this improve not only not only click-through rate, but also response rate. So you can see the control and the treatment there. And the answer resoundingly was yes. We actually saw a 51% increase in response rate. So that is donor conversion. More people who got this email, 51% more converted because of the image. The image is very powerful. However, not all images are created equal. I want to show you how the placement of an image matters too. It's not just putting images in the email that matter. Sometimes the placement of it matters too. So this is Harvest Ministries, a group out of Riverside, California. They had this premium focused appeal that was going out. Had this premium book called The Biggest Story that was, you can see down there at the bottom. And the image of this book was placed after the call to action, which we thought was interesting placement because if the book is an incentive and if it is designed to incentivize people to give right now and show them what we're going to send them as our measure of saying thanks, then we may actually be putting it in the wrong spot. It's placed after the call to action here. So we did a test. You can see that's kind of a zoom in. It says support God's work and then shows the incentive. We did a test to say, hey, maybe we should move this before the call to action, because if this is designed to actually increase that, then just putting an image of the book in the email is not enough. Maybe we need to put it in the right place. So we moved it to properly order the incentive. You can see it, a zoom in right there. You can see it kind of a zoomed out version of both appeals here. And the result was an 87.7% increase in click-through rate. So the image actually, the proper placement of the image rather helped us receive more clicks from the email and an 89.4% increase in donor conversion, which tells us that just including an image in our email is not enough. We need to be very careful about what that image does and that image bolsters the value proposition and the incentive, and then also that the placement of that image is correct. Like I said, a lot of the emails today showed me an image before they actually gave me any sense of copy, and so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Images can be very powerful. They can be worth 1,000 words, as you know, but we have to make sure that we're properly ordering these elements in order to get the intended action from our donors. They may reinforce the brand, they may increase the authority, but they also could tip our hand that it's email is marketing. So we have to make sure that we are using images wisely. Next metric from this morning's emails that we received, 98% of the email appeals we received were in some sort of designed template. Now, I want to be sensitive here because I realize that templates do serve a great purpose, especially in nonprofits. I've worked many years in nonprofits, and I used email templates when I was there too. Template allows us to create emails quickly, and it kind of gives us a framework for the design of our emails. But they can also tip off the hand. This is marketing. They don't. If you're going to sit down and write, your husband or wife or spouse or parents or kids an email, you're probably not going to load up your email template and start typing in there. So the question is, if we're not going to do it there, then why would we do that to our donors? In some ways, not using an email template can actually be easier if we actually send it like we might sit down at our email and send one to a friend or family member. So strategy 6, this is the last strategy we'll cover today. Actually, that's false. I've added a bonus. I just remembered. Strategy 6, testing your email template. Is it helping or hurting you? We really need to understand this. Let me show you some experiments. This is how the design of a fundraising email affects click-through rate. Let me warn you, don't walk into your creative director's office and immediately say that their designs are killing your email fundraising. That's a great way to start fights because this can be a very touchy subject, design. Some people have invested long hours in making these branded templates. So we always want to make sure that, yes, we're using data to be the diplomat, but that we're also being kind. So here's a fundraising designed email. Someone spent some time on this. This is a Caring Bridge. This is for a part of a campaign. There's a match in this advisory council member from Caring Bridge. His name is Rick Lalim. He was sending this email. So we thought, hey, maybe people don't know who this advisory council member is. Maybe this will give them some anchoring. So we put the Caring Bridge logo on there. There's this image at the top that talked about this family that was one of the families who was helped by the campaign, and you see the big buttons there, and there's kind of an outline around it, and there's a little pre-header there at the top, give to Caring Bridge and W donation, which kind of tips the hand of the intent of the email. But it's intended to, the email template is not inherently bad. It's intended to reinforce the brand and give some context to the ask. So there's good intent there, but we had this question, hey, if we take this email, we strip out all the branding and the template, and we create a really personal feel, same copy, we kept the button in there because it still has a templated element. It ended up being responsive and not designed. You can kind of see the two email templates here side by side, the branded templated email on the left and the unbranded de-templated email on the right. We saw an 80.3% increase in click-through rate and a big response, an increase in donor conversion rate too, because people trusted this email. So template tells somebody that this is coming, this is a mass email. Mass emails are not inherently bad. They're actually very efficient and effective for nonprofits. It's a great way to reach a lot of people at once. But how do we make sure that people don't feel like they're being marketed to? Because there's something that happens. You feel it. I know you do. Your marketing sensors come up. You have these shields come up, and you say, "Wait a minute, this person wants something from me." So how do we remove the feeling of that by the design of our email? Well, removing the template is one way to do that. Templates may help us in some ways. They may increase the speed of our ability to create emails, but they may also be incentivizing fewer people to take action and click. It's not just what your email looks like, though, and how long the copy is. It's also what the copy says. 92% of the emails we received this morning, this is subjective. I graded these, but they lacked a personal tone in the way that they spoke to me. So I want to talk about a bonus strategy, which is testing a really personal tone with your emails. We did a broadcast last month called People Give to People, how humanizing your fundraising can radically increase your email revenue. And I encourage you to go back and look at that if you want to dive deeper into this concept of tone. But I wanted to show you how personal tone really has a tremendous effect on your emails because, like we said, design is one way to remove the feeling that you're being marketed to, but tone is also a hugely impactful piece of the emails that we don't talk about very much. I've just been informed that we have a ton of questions, so I'm going to get through this so we can answer a lot of these questions. Personal tone in a fundraising email, how it affects conversion. So this is that Caring Bridge email. This is the treatment, the actual winner. So when we rolled this back out and sent this to the rest of the house file, we said, hey, let's take a totally different tactic here. This is a winner, but it doesn't mean that we're done. We had an 80% increase in click-through rate, but still most people didn't click through. So we had taken away the template. We had put these buttons in there. We had talked about another family. Say, hey, let's do this. Let's use a really simple, clear ask. Look at this initial copy, if you can see it. It says, hello, I know you've been using Caring Bridge to stay connected to your loved ones, and I hope it's been a source of strength for you. This first sentence of your email is hugely impactful because it tells people, at least gives them a feeling of who this is coming from. Is this coming from a person? This actually sounds like a person wrote it. Let's look at, I want to jump back one slide, and it says, hello, first name, this is a test. It actually said their first name there. When your world has been turned upside down, every connection counts, every bit of strength, every heart brought together. That's not necessarily bad. It's true. Every connection counts when your world has been turned upside down, yes. But do we actually believe that someone wrote that to us? It seems a bit, it was written by a marketer. So we took this really direct personal concept, removed all the branding down to the signature block, which is kind of where it appears in most email signatures, And look at the nuances of this email. Right now, we're in a short campaign to raise money to keep CaringBridge there for you and those like you who need a safe place to connect. As a nonprofit, we're supported by donations from people who use the site. If you'd like to support this, your gift will be doubled. So look at this. The call to action in this email is actually a link. It's some linked text. Click here to have your gift matched today. Jumping back, the call to action here is on this button that says, yes, match my gift now. But when we ask for things from our friends, we usually don't drop a button into our email. We usually send a link with them. So you can see the two control and treatment here on the design and the tone. And there was a 145.5% increase in donor conversion rate. So more than twice as many people became donors because they actually believed this email was coming from someone. So it actually tells us that while design might be important, while placement might be important with the images, and we might want to make sure there are cinder lines. Like tone can be one of the most impactful elements of our emails because people must believe that this email is coming from a person. If you see this, our conversion rate doubled, or more than doubled, really, because they believe that this is like not some all-seeing, all-knowing, omniscient marketing voice talking to them, but they believe it's a person. It also helped, as CaringBridge had learned, that this is coming from Kelly, a member of the development team, and not the founder, who they may be less likely to believe is going to send them an email. Show you one more. This was just an incredible appeal that's really changed the trajectory of this organization's fundraising emails. It's a ministry, a Juice for Jesus, out in San Francisco. It starts with a strong statement here. This is kind of the copy. This is actually adapted from a direct mail appeal. It starts with this statement. It says, a growing number of Christian leaders recently made statements that no mission work should go towards conducting or supporting sharing Jesus with the Jewish community. That's a strong statement, and it's kind of a declarative fact. I don't know if people actually, if you would actually write an email like that to someone that you were sending an email to. So we decided, we looked down the email. There's this image kind of dropped in there, which may denote a template, even though there's not like a really templated feel to this email. We don't often post and kind of right-align images like that. Then you go down, you see the link. There's kind of two calls to action. Which one do I click? There's a big button, and there's a signature in the email, which is interesting because that's kind of something we've brought over from direct mail. People don't actually sign emails. I don't know if you actually sign your emails. If it's possible, show me how. I'd love to test it. But we dropped this image in there and said, hey, like this is a signed email. So we said, let's really take this in a different direction. And the development team and this organization really wanted to say, hey, they said our organization, our donor relationships have been built on years of personal friendships and face-to-face interactions. So how do we make our emails reflect that? So they took the email and they said, hey, this simple line, I hope you and your family are well. It's disarming, in fact. It kind of lowers the shields. Hey, this person knows me. There's also another line here that says, since I know you have a heart for the Jewish people, I wanted to send a quick note about a burden that's been on my heart. I'm not saying that this email necessarily is, there's something magical about it, but we've done two important things here, two significant changes to the email. We don't start off with a strong statement. We start off by talking to a person. We also start off by insinuating that we know somebody or know something about that person. Since I know you have a heart for the Jewish people, we don't know the intricacies of every relation. We don't have a personal relationship with everyone on this email file. It's in the tens of thousands. But we know since they've shown an affinity, maybe we can insinuate that they have some sort of desire there. As you scroll down, the personalization is repeated. We tried this tactic. The team came up with this. They actually pasted the the link in there. So it's what we call a raw link. It says jewsforjesus.org/support-evangelism. We felt that that's actually how somebody would do that. They wouldn't link up text. They would just drop a link in there. At the end, we repeated the personalization. Thank you so much, first name. We took the email signature, the actual image of the signature out, and you can see the two emails right here. Most of the copy is the same, but the tone has really been affected on the beginning and the end of this email. We saw a 109% increase in click-through rate from this email and a 304% 6% increase in donor conversion. This is really transformative for this ministry. They're seeing multiple months of triple-digit growth in their email fundraising because they decided to work on the tone of their emails. So maybe it's not what you say, maybe it's not how your email looks, maybe it's not who it's from, maybe the most impactful thing can be how you say it. You see the click-through rates here, and then the conversion rates in these emails. When we address the recipient personally and give context for the communication and ask, we can really increase, or maybe able to increase click-through rate and conversion. Again, all of these tests are not here to tell you this is what you've got to go do. I would love for you to test these. Email testing platforms make it simpler than ever to do this, but you have to test what works for your organization because every organization is unique. But really, the reason we test is because every group of donors is unique. It's not about our organizations, it's about the people who receive these emails. They react differently. So I'm going to review real quick the 6 strategies we discussed today. Number 1, test a different sender. Most of the emails we received came from the figurehead of the organization. It may seem like a weakness to send from somebody else within the organization, but I think we'd all say that if our donors knew more people at the organization, they might be more likely to give because they'd have more relationships, they'd feel closer. So a different sender can actually help you do that, and we showed some data around that. Number 2, measure every metric, even when you're just testing subject lines or senders. Measure all the way through. Look at every metric because you may be affecting more than just open rate with your subject lines. Your sender may be affecting your click-through or your response rate because emails are fundamentally designed, as all communication is, to build trust with your donors. 3, test personalization of your emails. Some of you are saying, hey, we don't have first names for a lot of these people on the file. I can tell you one quick strategy. If you have an intern for a couple weeks left in the summer, go through and look at all the email addresses. A lot of people have their first name in the email address, and you can go ahead and drop that and append that to the record. But if not, go to your email sign-up form and make sure you're getting at least the first name, if not the first name and last name in that sign-up as well. Strategy number 4, test copy length and its effect on conversion. Again, I will never ever say that short copy or long copy is better. But we want to find which way of communicating, which style and length of communication is more effective. How long does it take to actually adequately express the value proposition? Is it something that takes 4 pages, or is it something that takes a couple sentences? Well, there's only one way to find out. See how your donors respond. Test images in your email. Do they really help? Are they hurting? Are you using the right images? Are you using the images in the right places? I challenge you, if you sent me an appeal, after you have heard this, go back and look at that appeal through these lenses. So often, after we send appeals, we never actually return and plot the data, look at the open rates, look at the click-through rates, and then try to look at them objectively. I understand it's hard. It's very, very hard to remove yourself from the creator or as the creator of these communications and try to look at through the donor. But it's so important as we start to challenge some of these things that we've always held as truth and fact. Number 6, test your email template designs. Is that really helping you or is it hurting you? Do people believe you? Are they more likely to respond if you actually remove your email template? Plain text emails can be your friend. And finally, the bonus, test the tone of your emails. It's not always what you say, but how you say it. Maybe writing like a person can actually increase the effectiveness because people believe that it's coming from a person. One little pro tip there, if you really want to test the tone, read your emails out loud. Go read them to a colleague and say, hey, does this sound like someone would actually write this to you? And start to pick apart your marketing jargon and the phrases that you're using that don't sound like they were personally written to someone on your email file, to one of your donors. If you wouldn't say it to their face, maybe we should try a different tone in the email. I showed this in the last broadcast about people giving to people. This is sometimes how we treat digital fundraising and email marketing. Like, we have all these people, we're just going to blast out some emails to them. Our research is really leading us to believe that we should approach digital fundraising like a conversation. If we could have a conversation with each one of our donors, we'd probably convert a lot more of donors. We'd probably retain a lot more donors. And what email does is allows us to scale these conversations. Instead of having one conversation with 100,000 people, it may actually allow us to have a lot of conversations at scale. Like I said, all this research, we're kind of codifying it and adding on to this thing we call the Fundraisers Creed. We'll send you a link to the Fundraisers Creed in the follow-up email along with the recording and everything else, links to the experiments. I want to walk through this Fundraisers Creed really quick. It says, we believe people give to people, that people don't give to organizations or from websites, people give to people. Fundraising is not about programs, it's about relationships. I'll tell you who understands this, and that's major gift officers. So maybe our email fundraising is allowing us to have similar tone and conversation that we have, when we meet people face to face. Article 2, we believe brand is just reputation. Fundraising is just conversation, and giving is an act of trust. That's why it's so important that our emails build trust with our donors. Trust is earned in 2 elements, integrity and effectiveness, but it demands that we put the interest of our donors first. So it doesn't mean we put our interests as an organization, how we want our emails to look, but we measure our donor response and see, hey, how do our donors respond to these things? What do they prefer? Finally, as I said earlier, we believe testing trumps speculation and clarity trumps persuasion. Fundraisers must base their decisions on honest data, and donors must base their decisions on honest claims. So we have to have mutual honesty as we approach our donors and start to ask them, even if it's through a relatively impersonal channel, like email. I challenge you to make that channel as personal as possible. I hope this has been really helpful for you. We've got a lot of questions. I'd love to answer some of those questions right now. We won't be able to get to all of them, but here's my email address, my Twitter handle. If you want to send me a question, I'd be happy to answer as many as I can. Kevin, I think you're still with us. Do we have some questions? Who's asked some questions, and what can we help and answer?
Sure. We've got quite a bit of questions, actually, Jeff. We'll see how many we can get through. We have about 5 minutes left. First question comes from Rick. He said, I have 2 issues with personalization. First, people who sign up rarely fill out their full name info, and we don't want to invade their privacy. And 2, I feel it's creepy when I get an email from out of nowhere with my name on it. However, I see your positive statistics, so I can't really argue with that. But do you think there's any downside to using personalization?
Yeah, Rick, I would say there is. We've done some testing that using personalization is incredibly nuanced, and you do walk a line with as donors give you more of their personal information. We have to be very judicious in how we steward that information, because we can come across as very, very creepy. As we know, people are getting more and more protective of their information. They see, spammers and things like that using their information in kind of inappropriate ways. And like we said, fundraising is an act of trust, giving is an act of trust, and so our donors must trust us. So as you gather that information, I would challenge you, and you can go into our research library and look at different ways we've been able to successfully and unsuccessfully use personalization. But be very, very aware of the nuance and how you use that. Sometimes it's something as simple as the greeting on an email, but sometimes we don't really want to tell them, hey, we know all these things about you. You made a gift last December. It was $140. That can be a little much for just a simple email communication. So we want to make sure that you're not just using personalization, but you're using it wisely and using the right amount of personalization.
Good. Next question comes from a different Rick. He said, do videos in an email work better than images, or used in a short form email rather than a long form email?
So video in an email work better than images. So I haven't really seen a format that lets you actually send the video in the email. So Rick, I'm assuming that you're actually using a thumbnail of a video in the email, because you have to click through to the landing page to watch it. We've seen differing things. Video is an incredibly emotional, powerful way to get a response and to start moving hearts and minds towards your cause. When we've seen videos on a donation page, there's a lot of research out there that shows that it stops people dead in their tracks. And while it might entertain them, while it might get a lot more clicks, it actually can suppress donations. So check the research library, search for video, and you'll see a lot of different uses of video thumbnails in an appeal. Sometimes it's great to show a thumbnail of video to get people to click, but the question is, the ultimate goal is a donation. Is a video hindering people from achieving that ultimate goal?
Sure. And then we have probably time for one more here. This one is from Kim. She said, you mentioned trying to personalize your emails, and you said removing the buttons in the second email. However, links don't work well on mobile devices, even in an email. Have you ever tested specifically buttons?
Yeah, we have tested buttons a lot. You're absolutely right. Um, Especially in mobile on mobile devices, it can be hard to click a link. That's something that's actually we don't think about enough is like what I call click area. So how much area are we giving somebody to click? Sometimes a big donate button does that, but sometimes if we've built trust through a really personal tone email, it kind of jars the experience and it says, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was when there's a big red donate button or a big green donate button slapped right there in the email. So we do have a lot of research on that. We've done a lot of testing around that. Honestly, I can tell you that as of late, a lot of the testing that we've done has shown that even though it may not give as big an area to click if you're on your phone and using your thumb, that putting an actual link in the email can improve response rate. So that's a very smart question and a very good question as we think about mobile fundraising and how much of our fundraising shifts to that. Kevin, we may be up on time. Let's keep answering. Let's answer a couple more.
Sure thing.
We can go a little longer. If you have to jump off, I understand, but I want to make sure that we answer as many of these questions as we can.
Sure. Next question comes from Mark. He said, how do you test personalization if it is sent through a company like Mailchimp that requires you to use templates? I think he's relating to that simplified email that you showed earlier.
Oh, requiring you to use templates. Interesting. We have a bunch of clients that use Mailchimp. I haven't seen. I think I know where you're going with this. Like they require at least. There's not a choice to use no template. And so the real question is like, can we create a template that removes a lot of those elements? Some of the emails you received about this live broadcast are actually technically an email template. But we've tried to strip out all the padding and all of the different design elements to make it feel as native as possible. So I think I get where you're going in there, and you may have to use a template. You may have to select one, and there's not an option to not use one. But maybe we can alter our template to make it feel as native as possible.
We have another question from Ben. He asks, what's the difference between response rate and conversion rate?
So response rate and conversion rate are typically the same thing. We use them interchangeably. Response rate can be, I guess they can both be more applicable than just a donation. Sometimes we'll send an email that's asking someone to fill out a survey. Sometimes we'll send an email that's asking someone to give us some piece of information or download something. But typically we'll say response rate if we're trying to use the larger sense of the term. So it's not just donor conversion. It can often include revenue as well. So responses can be donors plus dollars. So we get a larger response, if you will, from our emails.
Okay. And then last question for today is from Mark. What color of text does color of text make a difference, especially when it comes to the call to action?
It definitely can. There's a lot of behavioral science around the color and how it affects your motivation. Some people say that, hey, green means go. That means makes people want to click it. Red stops people in their tracks. Especially when it comes to the CTA, you saw a lot of the links, especially there at the end, were blue because that's kind of the default for an HTTP hyperlink. The real question is, what is we need to decide what our CTA is first before we decide the color. And I think that goes back to the earlier question about buttons versus links. Do we want to send a link or do we want to do a button? Because a button really honestly can be any color. It's a created, designed element. There's not any one way to do it. Whereas a link, most likely, if you paste it into an email, it's going to come across as blue. And there's a certain amount of familiarity and believability that people have with our links. So I would say that color and CTA, we want to get the right call to action first, and then we can decide and do some testing around the color. And we've done some testing around that as well. Do green buttons work better than red buttons and blue buttons? It's kind of what we call a thin test. There are probably more impactful things that we could be testing, like the length of the copy and the tone. But color can be a powerful motivator and can have an effect on click-through rate for sure.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I know at this point we're about 5 minutes over. Do you want to finish it up?
Yes, we're going to send an email out to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this has been helpful. We're going to send an email out with a recording. Also send links to the slide deck, links to the email, or sorry, the experiments we included today. I wanted to point you forward to our next webinar. We'll have a link to sign up for that in the email as well. It's with our friend Brian Carroll. It's a guest webinar on using empathy in your donor communications and how that can radically affect your response and your fundraising revenue. So hope you guys have a great rest of your day, rest of your Wednesday. If I can help, here's my email, here's my Twitter handle. Let me know. Shoot me a note, and have an awesome afternoon.